Okay, welcome to week 5. Forgive the hat, can't get a haircut. I would imagine you folks are going through the same thing. Let's get our engine started. Now, with the past week, you're doing a great job. Two things I would look out for. Some of you are doing an exemplary job. Look at your grades, look at my comments. Number one, watch the videos. Okay? It's kind of hard for me to tell you that now. I mean, you're either watching this or if you're not, but I also write that down. Number two, references, your research. Make sure your research is valid. Some of you are still making the mistake of, well, this is how I feel, this is how I was raised, so therefore I feel this way. And you find some kind of blog or some kind of political group that agrees with you. Valid references. I have a video on this. Watch it. Valid references come from universities, from government agencies, the National Institute of Health, Gallup poll. We're entitled to our own feelings. We're entitled to our own opinion. We are not entitled to our own facts. Okay? And you have to argue both sides of an argument to be a critical thinker and make a decision based on the data. So many of us, we're either Republican or Democrat, or we feel this way or we feel that way, and we don't want to look at the facts. We simply find opinions that suit our worldview, and that is not what this class is about. Now, moving on. What do we want for week 5? Number one, here it is from Blackboard, your assignments. One of them, the first one, very interesting. A former WNBA player talks about her mental illness. 50% of us will suffer a mental illness in our lifetime. That is according to the Center for Disease Control. Some psychologists think it's a lot more. Mental illness is highly misunderstood. We think it always means that you're just, seeing ghosts and you talk to yourself. That's not the case. There's many different kinds of mental illnesses, over 300 of them. Most of us, I believe, are going to suffer from it at some point or another, whether we lose someone, post-traumatic stress, depression, you name it, or simply stress and anxiety. This young lady, Miss Holzclaw, had bipolar disorder. She's very open about it. Okay? Read how you're supposed to respond to it. It is extremely interesting. You're going to have a lot of patients who suffer from mental illnesses. So being familiar with this kind of subject is only going to help you. Your web text, the discussion, your assignment outline. I will talk about that in a minute. Now, Miss Holzclaw, she played for the University of Tennessee. Okay? University of Tennessee, Tennessee's where I'm from. She was coached by Pat Head Summit, who's also in this photograph. Pat Head Summit, the most winning women's coach in history. She had more fans go to her ball games than the men's ball games, and she deserved it. I saw some of the ball games that she coached. Truly remarkable, and Miss Holzclaw, all Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players that ever lived. So, she suffered from bipolar disorder. What happened? Bipolar disorder, it's about mood swings. Okay? There's 4 different types. You can take a look at this here. I won't read this. But basically, what these different types are is that there's different levels of it. The 2 main ones are bipolar 1, bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is more severe. But the common language of this is that 1 minute a person is on top of the world. They feel like they can conquer the world. They're highly charismatic, very funny, very talkative, very energetic, and they're wonderful to be around. And they're very happy. The next minute, oh my gosh, they're just so depressed, so down, and they can't even function. And there seems to be no rhyme or reason for it. Now, that is very basic. My psychologist colleagues would say, Todd, that's oversimplifying. But basically, that's what it is. Okay? Now, it is often confused with borderline personality disorder. Okay? First of all, both of these terms have the letter B, P, and D. But borderline personality disorder, BPD, does not mean that you're borderline on being mentally ill. It's actually a very serious mental illness that a lot of psychologists refuse to treat because these people drive them absolutely bonkers. Now, bipolar disorder, most psychologists agree, it seems to be something biological. Maybe you're just simply born with it. And the episodes of being happy, mania, and the episodes of being depressed, seem to just be random. There's no rhyme or reason for it. Chemical imbalances in the brain. Borderline personality disorder, on the other hand, there seems to be at least some kind of reason why a person gets really down in the dumps. For instance, say a boyfriend doesn't return a phone call to a girlfriend. Most girlfriends would be irritated, maybe a bit concerned. Somebody who suffers from borderline personality disorder would perhaps attempt suicide, would show up and say, I'm never speaking to you again. I'm leaving you. You're a horrible human being, screaming. The fear of rejection, the absolute horror of being rejected, is something that can cause these very hyper emotional episodes. Okay? So at least there's some kind of trigger. There's at least some kind of reason, even though the response is very unreasonable. Again, oversimplifying, but a lot of people confuse these two disorders. There are similarities, it's very much up and down. And I'm sure you've seen relationships where one minute the couple loves each other, the next minute they hate each other, and it keeps going up and down. And that's a very addictive relationship. It's very much like gambling. One minute you just won $2,000 in Vegas, the next minute you're $1,500 down, then you're $100 up. That's why people go to Vegas. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. People don't go to Vegas to win money. Very few people win money in Vegas. It's for the excitement, it's for the emotional roller coaster. So just think of both of these disorders as up and down, but one is kind of like random reasons. The other one, at least there's some kind of reason behind the feelings of the victim of this mental illness. Moving on. So, there are a number of people who suffer and have admitted to suffering from bipolar disorder. This is just a handful of celebrities who do. Why would so many celebrities suffer from bipolar disorder? I want you to think about that. A lot of successful people suffer from bipolar disorder. Why? Well, one of the reasons I think maybe is that number one, when you are hyper and energetic and you are extremely excited and you are so incredibly elated, that's very, very charismatic. That's wonderful to be around. Wow, that person's just so happy and high and great and just high on life and this is wonderful and so infectious. I mean, it's just great. The second reason is when somebody who has bipolar disorder messes up, and they do mess up a lot, they get very, very angry, they get very depressed, they do horrible things and say horrible things to their friends and their family. They know they've messed up. They know, oh my gosh, what did I just do? It's like they come to their senses. They have to make up for it. They have to learn to be very good performers. Can you imagine if some son said the most horrible, awful things to his father, and his father didn't deserve it? He's just suffering from this, mental illness. He realizes the next day when he's kind of calmed down, when the chemicals in his brain has not been so bad, I messed up. I need to go back to my father and really apologize. And you have to be a pretty darn good performer, actor, orator, in order to convince your family, your friends to forgive you for all the things that you've messed up on. Okay? So here's a number of people. There's Mariah Carey, if you recognize her. Next to her is Kurt Cobain. You probably know what happened to him. Jimi Hendrix, considered the greatest guitarist that ever lived. You may not recognize the next photo under Mariah Carey. That is Ernest Hemingway, which many folks believe is the greatest American writer that ever lived. There's old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra in the hat. Many believe to be the greatest singer of the 20th century. Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's the gentleman on the bottom there in the bow tie. And many historians believed him to be the greatest Prime Minister and one of the greatest leaders in the history of the free world. Surely you recognize the lady holding the laser gun. That's Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. And on the bottom right there is Mel Gibson. And he actually won an Academy Award. Speaking of Academy Awards, there are some other Oscar winners that are bipolar. Let's start from the bottom this time. The gentleman in the glasses on the bottom right, that's Richard Dreyfuss. That's a frame of him in The Goodbye Girl, where he won an Oscar for Best Actor. On the bottom left is Catherine Zeta-Jones. She won Best Supporting Actress in Chicago. And that's Patty Duke on the top right. She won Best Supporting Actress in The Miracle Worker. She played Helen Keller, an individual who was deaf and blind. And the lady, not the gentleman, but the lady in the top left, if you have not seen this movie, shame on you, that's Vivien Leigh. She was married to Laurence Olivier, who's considered maybe the greatest actor of the 20th century. They were considered the premier couple of the 1940s. Any couple today wishes they were as famous as those two were. Vivien Leigh won an Academy Award for Gone with the Wind, as well as Streetcar Named Desire. And her bipolar disorder led to her death. After 20 years of marriage, her husband finally divorced her, couldn't take it anymore. And she ended up having sex with strangers in the middle of Central Park. She would just go out to Central Park from her apartment and try to find some stranger to have sex with and have sex with him outdoors. And she ended up getting very, very sick, being outdoors and taking off her clothes. And, she just got sick, and she was in her 50s, I believe, and she just passed away. So the bipolar disorder made her so manic and so believing that she could just do whatever she wanted, which is also a symptom of this disorder, that you just do whatever you feel like doing. And so, again, these highly charismatic people, world-class actors, world-class performers, suffer from this disorder because they understand, that they have to make up for what they've done. But also, when they get into those manic states, they're not shy, and they're very, very overt, and they're very extroverted with their personality. So when you are looking at this discussion post, look at a couple of references. Look at what bipolar disorder actually is and how it can be coped with, and what are some of the treatments. Next, let's go to your outline. Now, again, with your outline, remember to look at the example. It's right there on Blackboard, and that's the domain name of the Blackboard homepage that shows a very good outline. Basically involves 6 things. Number 1, what are your paragraphs? What's going to be the general content of the paragraphs of your paper? Number 2, some of you are forgetting this. References, references, references. Valid references. Saying a blog or a political group. You can mention that maybe in terms of what people think, but in terms of facts, scientific evidence, the National Institute of Health, Gallup, university studies, government agencies, these are the things that you need to look at. I certainly also don't mind the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major newspapers, some of the major magazines like Forbes, Inc., American Psychological Association. You can do associations as well, as long as they're valid and scientific in nature and recognized by the scientific and journalistic community as valid. Okay? Looking at both arguments, this is what this argument says, this is what this argument says. You have to mention both arguments and then exactly explain why you're going to lean towards one over the other. Okay? Don't do an emotional argument. You could say, this is why people are emotional about it. This is why people feel the way they feel, but eventually we have to look at the facts. Okay? Again, we're entitled to our own opinion. We're not entitled to our own facts. Finally, what is your conclusion? Now, again, you're not writing the whole paper here, but you're outlining how you're going to attack this debate, this argument. All right? Email me with any questions. That's my telephone number if you want to call me. Please mention that you're in the psychology class when you do. I have more than one class. Keep safe. I know some communities are opening up. Continue to wear your mask, wear gloves if you can. God bless. Keep safe, my friends, and I will talk to you soon.